Welcome to Live with the Author, Bridging Research to Practice. I'm Amanda Goodwin, and I'm one of the co-editors of Reading Research Quarterly. And today we have with us one of our fantastic Reading Research Quarterly authors, Theresa Roberts. Welcome, Theresa.
Welcome to all of you, and thank you for having me.
Well, fantastic. Theresa, can you tell us the title of your study?
Yes, the title of my study is Preschool Alphabet Learning, Cognitive Teaching Sequence and English Proficiency Influences.
Phew. Well, we're going to get to learn some good things about that. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to do this research.
Well, you can see I'm not a young person, so I've been in the field a long time, and my research interests were always engendered by what was going on in classrooms related to reading instruction, and in particular English language learners. And I began looking into issues related to English language learners, and in particular beginning reading processes. And I developed what I've called a challenger research agenda, which has been fueled by what I have believed to be important questions where there may be controversy or uncertainty in the field. Now, the challenger part of the current study in Reading Research Quarterly has been around the idea that there has been a lot of question about how important the alphabet is and how important it is in particular for preschoolers. And so that has become the area of sort of the challenges and questions I've wanted to address related to the alphabet.
Well, fascinating. So that kind of leads us right into you talking to us a little bit about your study. What was your study and what was its main findings?
Okay, well, here's what our study was. So first of all, the study was sort of the foundations for the study were motivated by the alphabet is critical for successful learning to read. It is difficult to learn the alphabet in spite of what may seem the apparent ease of it. The importance of the alphabet is undervalued in early childhood settings. We've had lots of studies indicating pretty poor outcomes in alphabet learning for preschool children from participation in programs or instruction, and that the instruction based on that these studies were based on was largely theoretical. So we began by taking a long time to think about how do kids learn alphabet letters, and our response to that was that it is largely what we called a paired associate learning task, meaning that what the requirement is in learning the alphabet is to take the letter name or letter sound and pair it with the letter forms. Paired associate learning.
So is it the letter and its sound? So, for example, my daughter's Maddie, and Maddie,
Yes.
for example, looks at an M and she says, that's Maddie's M. Is it also the idea that it can connect authentically to the child, or is it just the letter and the sound?
Well, for the paired associate learning part of it, now it's just, our analysis of it was that it's largely a memory task. It is not a meaning-mediated task, largely, to learn that this letter name or sound goes with this letter form and to stitch them together. Now, the utility of that, the engagement towards that, the ultimate purpose of that, of course, becomes something that is intimately tied to meaningful language. But when you're looking at the task of learning, so that when you're shown this letter form and you say S or S, that is largely a paired associate learning task where you form a memory for the symbol and its label, and you pair them together and you store them in memory. There's the connection making. There's the label and the letter form connecting part, and there's two components to that, of course. There's the verbal part, the S or S, and there is the visual part, this letter form. And so we said, okay, so we're going to have one group that we just do a lot of the connection, the stitching together of the two pieces. We're going to have another group that has some stitching, but also has a part where we emphasize the sound part, the speech part of that. So that was our second group. Our third group have said, okay, we've still got that basic stitching, it's unavoidable, but now we're going to have instruction that adds to that a piece on the letter form part, which we called orthographic learning.
And what did your study find? What was the most effective?
It's a relative difference in emphasis. Emphasis on the pairing, emphasis on the letter form, or emphasis on the speech. Now, so we did all of our 10 weeks of instruction, the same amount of time in every group. The lessons were highly similar. same language except in these key areas where they differ. And what we found was that that our simple paired associate learning, where kids were just pairing, doing activities where they were just pairing the letter label and the letter shape, was significantly better for alphabet learning than our groups where we either added more of the orthographic through the writing or the articulation through the attention to speech sounds. So what we think is a happy finding from that is the fact that the simplest routine, where you're not having to manage these mirrors and writing boards and the pictures of the mouth, was actually the most effective. And that finding also tends to confirm that paired associate learning is a really powerful learning mechanism for learning alphabet letters.
So, Theresa, just to get into that, though, so when you say it was most effective for learning alphabet letters, is that learning their name, like S, or is that learning that this is S and S? Like, is it both? Or?
In most studies, most previous studies on alphabet learning, letter names are the target, or the outlier, what's tested. And letter names are easier to learn than letter sounds. But arguably, letter sounds are more foundational to learning to read. So in our study, we measured both. And in addition, in our study, something else that we think was somewhat unique is that we measured both accuracy, being able to say S or S, and speed of saying that. How quickly, how many times in a period of, in 20 seconds, children could correctly name the letter names, and we also tested the letter sounds. And we found that basic paired associate stitching learning was most effective overall. There were some nuances, but most effective overall for learning letters of the alphabet, both accuracy and speed, and particularly of those more difficult letter sounds.
Fascinating. So what does your study have to say for teachers? If I'm a teacher, how do I implement it?
And first of all, that learning letters is a difficult memory task. We shouldn't assume that by exposure alone, children are just going to pick it up. So we can recommend that teachers in preschool teach the alphabet with simple paired associate routines, letter focused, and within that, what matters is that you provide lots of that. There's quick pairing of those items, that children are given supportive and gentle correction as needed, and that they practice those relationships in a lot of different kinds of activities. And also we find that eliciting production, that when children, that it's important that children are actually saying these, the letter names and letter sounds during learning, not just watching or listening to other children doing it. Now, another nuance of the study that we didn't discuss was we also measured whether or not learning letter names first seemed to be more beneficial, or learning letter sounds first was more beneficial. And we found that learning letter sounds produced greater overall alphabet knowledge, learning letter sounds first, which was somewhat of a surprise to us, because there's been a lot of interest in the literature that when children learn letter names, that they're really learning letter sounds. Because listen, S. So when I say the letter name S, I am saying implicitly the S that's in there. But what we found was that directly teaching the letter sounds first was more beneficial. So begin with letter sound instruction, followed by letter name instruction very soon thereafter. And we also did our instruction in small groups. And so we'd like to recommend for teachers that this is, the preferred and the emphasized small group instruction in preschool classrooms, that this activity for letter learning is very well suited to a small group context.
Great. So just to sort of think about what you're saying, how much of the day should be spent in these small groups doing this paired associative learning?
Well,
with
I thank you so much. I thank you so much for asking that question. Our studies, and we have 3 different studies, we average about 12 minutes per lesson. They are fast-paced. Materials have to be distributed quickly and whatnot. The children go through the routines quickly. They have self-management. So you saw, like in those games and the books that I showed you, each child has their own materials. So it's participatory and self-regulated. And but in general, our recommendation would be, based on our studies, you should be able to get this instruction done in about 10 to 12 minutes.
And I
So we're
think
not
that's really
talking about
important when we think about preschoolers, right? So their day should be filled with play, should be filled with book
Yes,
reading, should be filled
yes.
with running around, and then should be filled with some of this, small
A
doses
small,
of this
a
paired
small
associative
but
learning.
regular and seriously focused upon piece of this.
Very
Yep.
cool. So, what does your study have to say for principals and policymakers?
Well, I think what the study has something important to say more strongly, or very something important to say to policymakers indirectly through professional development and through teacher preparation programs. Because preschool teachers, these kinds of activities and routines that are really letter focused, explicit, directed instruction that are teacher guided, many preschool teachers have not had the preparation or support to learn how to do those kinds of activities. In fact, many teacher preparation programs for preschool teachers emphasize not to do this kind of instruction. And so I think teachers need a lot of support for that. Memory is a necessary and an important thing, not a bad thing. We hear all these things about rote memory. That explicit instruction is important and beneficial. Speed matters. That's hard for preschool teachers. You know, they don't like the idea of understandably, of hurrying up children. Everyone's lives are so hurried. But speed of letter identification is really important. Eliciting oral responses from children, particularly for DLLs, preschool teachers are reluctant to do that. They say they'll start talking when they're ready. Teachers have, and as I already said, they have not had the opportunity or the support to learn how to do this small group instruction in a really focused, explicit, goal-oriented way. And they also have not had much opportunity to develop knowledge about the structure of the English language, which is certainly makes it harder to teach the alphabet if that's something you don't feel confident with yourself.
All right. And so, what do we tell parents regarding your
Well, the
findings?
study clearly doesn't have anything directly to say to parents. I think that what I would suggest, I think what the study does say to parents is that parents could and should feel confident in asking about alphabet instruction and asking how it's being done in the classrooms. Is it being done in what kind of a way? I don't think there's any implications that can be drawn from the study for what parents should do, but beyond supporting letter-focused instruction in preschool classrooms for their children.
And I just want to emphasize there, too, just because we were chatting about it, that letter-focused instruction should be a small part of the instruction in preschool classrooms. I think really what we want to give parents the tools for is to think about the broad development of their kids. And so where do we go next? What's your research? Where's your research heading?
Another important thing, sort of back to your question about running around the classroom and these other kinds of literacy experiences and thinking about the Challenger research agenda, we think that it's it would be very important to compare these best methods of paired associate learning to what are the more favored, more contextualized approaches that are recommended by letter instruction in children's storybooks and through children's names and through looking at letters in whole words. We've just completed that study that looked at that.
We'll be staying tuned to those findings.
Yes, you will. I hope.
One quick question I had for you is we say preschool, but preschool can be a pretty large age range.
Yeah.
What age are you thinking about when you're suggesting this kind of instruction?
The convention, and we use preschool in the sort of conventional sense, which refers to children 3 to 4, and sometimes 3 to 5 years of age, right before they're eligible to start kindergarten, whatever the state eligibility requirements are.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. If you want more information on Theresa's study, you can go to the Reading Research Quarterly website and read her full article. And Theresa, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, and I hope something came out here to help teachers and other researchers think about alphabet letter instruction in preschool.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much.